A mobster from New Jersey, Tony Soprano, a capo regime in the DeMeo crime family, is framed between the legs of a nude sculpture in a psychiatrist's office. Tony is invited to enter Dr. Jennifer Melfi's office as she opens a nearby door. Following a few moments of hesitancy, she asks him to tell her a little more about himself before explaining that he was referred to her office because he had a panic attack during a family barbecue. Tony identifies himself as a waste management consultant to her. Before she stops and explains the idea of the doctor-patient confidentiality clause, indicating that she understands what he's talking about, he starts telling her about how he met a friend for coffee. In a flashback, Tony is driving to a meeting with his nephew Christopher Moltisanti, who is actually his wife's cousin but whom Tony views as a nephew. After Tony scolds Christopher for being lazy, they spot a man and woman strolling down the sidewalk. Alex Mahaffey, the man, runs away as soon as he spots Tony in the passenger seat. While Tony takes over the wheel of Christopher's car and eventually runs the man's leg over, Christopher exits the car and begins chasing him. In addition to disparaging Tony, it is disclosed that Mahaffey is an obsessive gambler who borrowed money from him and was unable to repay it. The injured man was beaten by Tony and Christopher, who also told him to pay back his debt before they left. In the present, Tony confides in Melfi that he feels as though his best days are over and that he has been experiencing nightmares lately. He has another flashback in which he wakes up one morning, goes outside to get his paper, and finds his swimming pool occupied by a family of ducks. This makes Tony very happy, and as his family looks on from inside, he feeds them his leftover breakfast. Meadow and AJ, Carmela Soprano's children, are prepared for school. They depart shortly after Tony tries to pique their interest in the ducks. Tony informs Melfi that Carmela and Meadow aren't getting along back in the present. Tony starts telling Melfi about his career, leaving out the violent parts. He tells a story about a meeting he went to that was actually about Barone Sanitation, one of his family's money laundering fronts. During the meeting, Tony discusses an assassination with his lieutenants, Sal Big Pussy Bonpensiero, Silvio Dante, and Paul Polly Walnuts Galtieri. Silvio claims that Corrado Jr. Soprano, Tony's uncle and senior mob boss, is trying to murder Little Pussy Malanga, a turncoat, at a friend's restaurant. Tony and Christopher visit Vesuvio restaurant and welcome Artie Buccio, the owner, and Junior, who is dining with other staff members. They eat lunch together alone and talk about their history. Tony visits his mother Livia's home later that day. He catches up with her while bringing in a CD player he purchased for her. He tells her that Junior might be causing Artie trouble and invites her to talk to him. He then tries to cheer her up by telling her about a lovely retirement community. She declines his offer, stating that she is content where she is and doesn't want to go there. Soon after, he departs. Returning to the present, Tony informs Melfi that his son's birthday fell on the same day as the panic attack, and they had planned a barbecue and party for him. He watches the ducks get agitated and then take off as he tries to light the barbecue. He starts having a panic attack at that point and passes out on the grass before the family can come to his aid. As Silvio extinguishes the fire, Carmela calls 911. Tony has an MRI the following day. Carmela shows up, checking in on him. The conversation devolves into him griping about a priest she has become friendly with after he expresses concern that he has a brain tumor. She informs him of the distinction between Tony and her own is that he is going to hell when he dies. Tony keeps telling Melfi about his waste management issue. He informs her that the issue was resolved for him by a colleague, Christopher. Christopher takes the heir to Triborough Garbage, a rival waste management organization, to a deli for a drug deal in another flashback. Christopher puts Emile Kohler to death when he stoops to snort a line of cocaine. After Tony tells Melfi about his interactions with Junior, she inquires as to whether the man plays a significant role in his life. Tony and Junior are debating the Little Pussy hit in a flashback. Junior remains unmoved and continues with his plan to execute the hit at Artie's restaurant in spite of the former's attempts to persuade him. Tony storms out in frustration when Melfi tries to continue the conversation about the ducks in his pool representing a depression. Livia is taken to the Green Grove retirement community by Tony along with the rest of the family. Even though they want her to live there, Livia won't accept it. Tony suffers another panic attack and passes out as she lashes out about not wanting to become dependent on nurses. Tony returns to Melfi for a follow-up appointment and talks about his mother. When she questions him further, he elaborates on how his business has been negatively impacted by RICO statutes, government agencies' use of electronic monitoring equipment. To his annoyance, Melfi writes a prescription of Prozac for his anxiety attack. At Silvio's strip club, the Bada Bing, Tony and Chris meet with Herman Hesh Rabkin, a friend of Tony's late father and Mahaffey's agent. The discussion shifts to Junior's upcoming hit after Hesh claims that Mahaffey is unable to pay the money. In order to prevent the hit from happening and to ensure that the restaurant is closed, Hesh proposes that Artie take a vacation. Later, Tony visits Artie and persuades him to spend the next 2 weeks on a cruise, even though Charmaine, Artie's wife, tries to dissuade him. The following day, Pussy and Hesh accompany Mahaffey to a bridge to discuss a payment plan to settle the latter's debt. Their attempt at coercion succeeds, and Mahaffey agrees to their terms. Later, Tony is golfing and takes a handful of Prozac, which Melfi prescribed for him. He then learns that the Triborough Garbage Company withdrew their bid due to Emil's disappearance, but also that Artie wishes to speak with him. The restaurateur reluctantly returns the tickets and says he is unable to leave. That night, Dr. Melfi is having dinner with a friend when Tony and a woman other than Carmela, his mistress Irina, walk in. The man is surprised when Tony greets her, but assumes Melfi is unable to say anything due to confidentiality concerns. The following evening, Tony and Carmela return to the same eatery. To her delight, he informs her that he has begun taking Prozac and has gone for therapy. Chris calls him when they get home to let him know that little Pussy has come to town. Tony and Silvio go to Meadows' softball game the following day and decide to act something out right away. That evening, Silvio visits Vesuvio's and, after closing, plants an explosive inside, demolishing the structure of the restaurant. When Tony returns to Melfi, he tells her that he believes he is cured, but she tells him that the therapy isn't helping, but rather the act of expressing his emotions. When he realizes that the ducks represent his own family and that their escape and the birth of ducklings are reminiscent of his own thoughts about what would happen if Carmela and the children ever left, he finally loses it. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe for the next part.